What's the words of that song, Tracy, we sang the new one we learned about no negotiation with the God of all creation?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that sentence.
No negotiation.
I'll stop all negotiations
Yes.
with the God of all creations. Man, how many times did we negotiate with God? God, if you'll just do this for me now, God, here's what I'm going to do, but I love that. I'll stop all negotiations with the God of all creations.
Sometimes you lose direction and are confused with what to do next. You need help. You need motivation. You need a next level revelation.
Luke chapter 13, verse 6, then Jesus told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard. He came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the worker who tended the vineyard, for 3 years now I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and each time I inspect it, I find none. Cut it down. Why should it continue to deplete the soil? But the worker answered him, sir, leave it alone this year too until I dig around it and put fertilizer on it. Then if it bears fruit next year, very well. But if not, you can cut it down. I want to speak to you today about producing what's already in you. Producing what's already on the inside of you. How many know we all deal with disappointments in life? Sometimes with a family member, sometimes with our whole family, sometimes with jobs, sometimes with just missed opportunities, and we deal with disappointments. But if you look at the parable that we just read, it will show you how to deal with all that junk, all that stuff. And what I want to do today is kind of just take a walk through the vineyard with Jesus here. Jesus is surveying the nation of Israel right here. And he didn't find what he was looking for. And so to illustrate his point, he looks at this farming example with this tree. And we all have seasons in our life, church, where we can identify with different stages of this parable.
Oh, yeah.
Things that we go through in our life. Here's what we've got. We've got the owner of the vineyard who's disappointed. We got a manager of the vineyard who's disappointing. And we got the tree in the vineyard that's dysfunctional. We've all been all three in our life, have we not? We've all experienced those three moments. Disappointed, disappointing, and dysfunctional. How many times have you ever prayed over a seed and not seen a harvest? That's disappointing, is it not? We've had times when we didn't live up to standards. Maybe someone expected of us. And then we become the disappointment. You experience times when what you planted doesn't produce. It's dysfunctional. But the bottom line to disappointment is when what's been planted in you isn't producing through you. You have things in you. God's placed a spiritual DNA inside of you. Potential that doesn't manifest, a dream that won't come to fruition, ideas and concepts that you can't get across. Jesus is using this metaphor here of a tree and a vineyard to represent the nation of Israel. The DNA was there. But when it didn't produce, the owner became insistent that either it produce or we cut it down. That's important to remember, church, because if what you planted isn't growing, then it's dying. Yep. And dead things take up space in your life.
Right. Yep.
And it keeps you from dealing with disappointments on a deeper level. Yep. Jesus said this, it's like the owner of a vineyard that's representing God, who comes to the manager of the vineyard and says, I've been coming here for 3 years seeking fruit, trying to find something. Jesus is saying, I've gone through the nation, I've seen the synagogues, people are teaching, people are using law, and they're using that law to condemn other people rather than instruct people into righteousness. Right. The religious activity in land is not being fruitful. It's not bearing any fruit. Then Jesus says, he said before Abraham was, I am. Right. See, here's what you got to realize. Abraham got this whole faith thing started. God told Abraham, through you will come many nations, and I'll bless the earth through you. He told Abraham, I'm going to bless you to be a blessing. That's not Pastor Manny saying. He told Abraham that. I'm going to bless you to be a blessing. Side note, church, we are a seed of Abraham.
Amen.
So every seed and blessing that belongs to Abraham pertains to you and I. When Jesus shows up, the fruit on the tree looks nothing like the tree that was in the ground. Nothing. So Jesus said, I planted you as one man to produce a nation. And I produced a nation to bless the world. But what I see, instead of the world being blessed, is the poor being oppressed. People being trampled by those who claim to represent my name. You got to see this, church. The tree represents Jesus' leadership. The vineyard represents the nation. So why a fig? Because a fig represents peace and prosperity. In Genesis 3, the first fruit tree mentioned in the Bible was a fig tree. Adam and Eve took a leaf, covered their nakedness. Now I want to set this up right, so in just a moment when I make it practical, you'll get it. Jesus is talking about a leadership system that is robbing the potential from getting to the people. He says, when the leadership is not producing according to purpose, the people suffer. One thing we have in common with leaders in the Bible is this. God's still looking for leaders. God is looking for leaders in our homes. Men to rise up and be the men that God's called them to be. God's looking for leaders at our jobs. God's looking for leaders in our schools. But when leaders don't fulfill their function, everything in the vineyard suffers. Everything. In this parable, the political turmoil is a result of bad leadership. Look at verse 6 again of Luke 13. Then Jesus told us this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So what's been planted is not producing. Now remember this. God never picks from where He does not plant. God doesn't pick from where He doesn't plant. He came looking for something that He had planted. It says the owner of the vineyard planted a fig tree. So when he came to reach for a fig, his expectation wasn't what? It wasn't met. He knew what he planted. He remembered what he planted. So when he compared it to what he saw in the tree, he said, now wait a minute. I planted something that's not producing. I point that out, church, because some of you are so busy trying to produce something that God never placed in you. We're so busy trying to get this thing out, and God never placed it in us to get out. You don't have peace and you don't have power because you keep trying to produce oranges when God planted you to produce figs. So what you do, watch this, you rob the potential that you could have used to produce figs, trying to produce something that's not in your spiritual DNA. Maybe you sit here and you're disappointed with things in life, and the reason why is you're trying to produce something that's not in your destiny. You're miserable. You're walking around, you're saved, you're Holy Ghost filled, going to heaven, but you're miserable because you're trying to produce something that's not in your spiritual DNA. It all comes down to one question. What's in you? Because when you know what's in you, you can deal with disappointment better. You can stop being mad about not producing fruit that was never encrypted into your spiritual DNA. When you know what's in you.